Okay, everybody. It is Sunday, 11 a.m., 11:05 actually, and it's so good to have all of you, all of us here, this beautiful community, to go to the silence, get in touch with ourselves. And then we have a special treat today. We're going to have right here on my right-hand side, we have Dr. Castellanos with us, a good friend of ours. And we know, and then we all always have the honor, the privilege of having him with us to listen and, get from his knowledge and wisdom. And that's what we're going to be doing today. But before, we're going to be doing what we usually do. We're going to go to the silence and get those 5 elements that we always talk about: the silence, the slowness, the stillness, the solitude, and the simplicity, right? So we're going to go to the silence, we're going to slow down, we're going to try to stay still. In a way, we're going to be with ourselves, so there is an element of solitude there. And our practice is very simple, okay? Silence, slowness, stillness, solitude, and simplicity. This is what we bring to the practice. And so we are all experienced meditators here. What we're going to do, we're going to spend the first 30 minutes in silence. We'll provide a very little guidance in the beginning, very light guidance. And then we're going to dissolve the silence, and we're going to have this conversation with us. Okay? So, finding your posture, the posture that, as you know, invites wakefulness, alertness. Feeling the soles of your feet, the back part of your thighs, the buttocks. So the lower body is providing a good base for the upper body. The upper body is upright. So you are in that posture that is stable, upright, and balanced. The back is straight, but it's not stiff. Just check with your head, make sure that your head is well balanced on top of your shoulders. Dropping the shoulders away from the ears. Relaxing the facial muscles, softening the eyes. Allowing the jaw to drop freely. And breathing, noticing that the body is breathing. Noticing the air coming in and moving out. And as usual, when the mind wanders, just bring it back to feeling the body and feeling the body breathing. Remaining as much as possible as an observer. connecting with the sound of my voice and bringing the attention back to the breathing. Once again, noticing the air coming in and moving out. And observing the cycle of breath, and without rushing at your own pace. At the end of the third out breath, the invitation is to open your eyes if you have your eyes closed and reconnect with the world around you. So as we approach the end of this practice, if you'd like to join me, we bring our hands together to express our gratitude to each other for showing up, for being here, for practicing. And we bring to mind once again that our practice is not selfish. We do not practice for ourselves alone. We know that our practice benefits the entire world. So we bow to each other in gratitude, saying, thank you for your practice. Thank you. Excellent. So we don't have anything planned today. I was going to pass the baton on to Gus, but Gus asked me to perhaps ask him a question. And so I was entertaining so many questions. I like when you come that you give me or you give us a little bit of the update on the research, because you have been following the research about mindfulness and neuroscience. This is one of the things that you could talk about. But since you asked me to ask you a question, I think that I'm going to be more personal now. In which ways do you think that mindfulness has benefited you?
Thank you, Piero, for stumbling on my words today for some reason. I appreciate being invited here. Thank you for letting me come back. It's a beautiful space and to see you and share this with you. And the question you asked is one that I asked other people in my classes enough, and so it kind of vaguely runs in the back of my mind what's happening to me. But the one thing I have noticed and in a sense guides the way, like when we finish an MBSR course, those 8-week courses, to remind people that these, if you keep practicing, of course we don't keep practicing, but if you keep practicing, the so-called benefits will change. So while I came to this world in 1998 when I was practicing medicine, having my own personal issues with so-called burnout, job-related stress, all that bit, and it was useful for that because it really did help me. I was developing so-called bad habits to deal with my stress, and I was able to actually stop those bad habits. the more I've done this work, the more I've done the practices, and particularly when we do practices like this, the silence and multi-day silent retreats, and I get to see the functioning of my mind, then I can, I guess you call them benefits, for lack of a better word, how they evolve and change and how they are seemingly going a direction, even though I don't know where they're eventually heading to, but how they shift from just simple symptom reduction, reduce my stress, reduce my anxiety, improve my sleep, that kind of thing, to a more awakened state to what's happening around me, around us, and the interdependence, for instance. That's something I was not that well in tune. I mean, intellectually, I know all about that. Yeah, I know, of course, we're interdependent and all that, but that has become much more of an obvious, direct experience in everyday life, and the usefulness of looking at life that way. So there's a lot that has changed over the years, in the continuation of practice. And a lot of it is hard to put in words. It's not so simple to say, oh, I feel like this today. I feel more at ease, more centered, more grounded. I could say all of that, but to an extent, I'm like, yeah, it's okay to have more anxiety or feel grounded all the time, be peaceful, but and that is okay if that's what you get out of this. That's great. That's what you prefer and benefits you. That's great. I'm just talking about myself here. It feels like I'm missing out on a lot if I'm just looking for symptom reduction. Let me put it that way. So I can leave it there for a moment.
So a follow-up question, because you mentioned extended periods of silence, like for instance, going to silent retreats, and you say that it's deep. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Given that I should set my wife up. My wife just left this morning, actually, for her 20-day silent retreat.
Yeah,
So
she's amazing.
she's a power meditator. Yeah, she does this all the time. Yeah, and so because I do have her as my so-called best teacher, we get to talk about these things and compare notes and stuff. I do come, by transparency, from most of sort of a neurological background, because that's what I did for a living. I was a neurologist. And so I have this sort of view of brain-mind functioning, I guess is the way I frame it still. And while I am open to a whole lot of other things, I've done enough study of so-called spiritual and mystical, and I've done my share of psychedelics many years ago, and so I know all of it. I have some ideas about all of that. I still, when I do these practices and these silent retreats, is sort of watching how my mind works, to the extent that there are these so-called patterns, habitual patterns, these patterns that are triggered by whatever, and how those patterns leads to, use the word in here, suffering versus helpfulness, and this one's causing harm and the consequences of that action, that happened. So I get to see how this whole thing rolls, so that backing it up, if I have an opportunity to adjust what's coming up, do so before it's way down the line and I've done something harmful, intentionally or unintentionally. Because sometimes this stuff just comes out. Yeah, ask my wife. Wow, you're so mindful. Why'd you say that again? Yeah, so I have to kind of back off a little and just say, being much more aware of how these things, my reactivity, I guess is the way to put it.
It's interesting because it affects our behavior, right?
Oh yeah.
It's kind of saying we're much more aware of what we are saying, what we are doing, and what we are not saying and not doing. We're much more aware of what we are thinking. And so it does affect the behavior. So with all these many years of practice, how did it affect your behavior?
Yeah, to put it in a very simple way, as she puts it, I'm a little less assholey these days. I can just leave it open like that, because it's such a moving target. I've been married with her. We've been married 45 years or so, whatever, 43. And so using that as the best guide, because that's the person that's almost my mirror this whole time. In my classes, the issue is that I don't have people serially coming to my classes, so there's nobody there that's keeping watch and making observations and stuff. And so it's hard, sometimes we're the last to see our own issues, the positives or the benefit or the negative. So I leave it that loosely like that. But there's a lot. I've learned a lot. I don't identify as a Buddhist, but I do, obviously in this work, do quite a bit of this work in the Buddhist tradition. And the Eightfold Path, having that training in morality and ethics, the right speech, right livelihood, and right action, that is a really good way to frame that training to me in morality and ethics is an independent training that goes on forever, as opposed to the training in the mind training with the meditations. The mindfulness and concentration training of the Eightfold Path is one training, but I have learned, I've seen examples, I've seen it myself. I can be a power meditator and still be a jerk.
Correct.
Yeah. And yet you can be a saintly person and never really have done a lot of meditation. And so bringing the two together, they're separate trainings that just need to be going. This is the benefit of having a Sangha. As much as it is helpful to sit together for a little while, that's great, but also to hold each other accountable as well as support each other.
So you talked a little bit about something that you were exploring a little bit more. So you said interbeingness or interdependence. This is becoming more present, or the reflection about this is becoming more present in your life. So some of the things that are immediate in the practice of mindfulness is noticing the impermanence of everything. But perhaps the interrelationship, the interdependence, the interbeingness is not so evident. Is this what you are exploring more these days?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes back. So, everything from the Western cultural, we're independent, especially in the American, the John Wayne, I'm the person you're fighting. You see it a lot in conservative America, and I'm not trying to be political here, but each person is responsible for themselves, take care of yourself, put the bootstrap, whatever that is. And then also as a physician, because the physician, especially in private practice, the so-called buck stops here. We were really instilled on that, not only from the I'm responsible for the patient in front of me and his health and well-being, but from the legal side, that they start, you mess up, you're the one, even though they did this, that person, that, we're going to sue you. So we had that sense of I am here and I'm the one that's a separate being that is outside of you, and we're interacting in a certain way. But when I started doing this work, when I left medicine many years ago, and I started doing this work more, I could just see that either way, even though I was a so-called independent doctor, I needed, and I really liked having a collaboration with other doctors. I mean, it really was not only the best thing for the patient, for me not to come in and say, well, I'm the God doctor, I'm telling you what to do, but we've got this issue here. I've talked to my colleagues, we've collaborated a little bit. I've got some information from them. So already I could see that was so much more beneficial. I mean, it's just intuitively part of our lives. It's just that it was never called out that way. But here now, more than ever, it's very obvious the pandemic, if it did anything, was really put that in place. I mean, the whole world just sort of got together, one virus spreads around the world, and the impact is rolling back and forth, whether it's economic, shut things down, open things up, I got sick, I wear a mask, I don't wear a mask, that kind of thing. Really showed that we really are interdependent. The more people act in one way, the more things will go in a direction, no matter how individual you may be in that thing, you couldn't escape that.
What's your experience with nature? And I'm saying, like, I know that you go to the beach a lot, and perhaps I should preface with my experience. My experience is I experienced a lot of interbeingness, if you will, with with the weather, with the wind, with the sun, with the trees, with the sand, with the ocean, whatever it may be. But I think much more, and I think this is a good thing now that we are in Earth Week, and Earth Day is April 22nd, coming up next Saturday, to include this idea of interdependence with all beings. So what is your experience with nature? Do you feel that this is something that is, that you feel like, perhaps I'm forcing you to
I'm
say.
waiting for you to finish.
No, I wake up very early in the morning, for instance. I like to go to the beach, and I'm privileged. I can go to the beach and watch the sunrise pretty much every day. And this is just my experience. I mean, a little bit of walking meditation, there's a little bit of solitude there. But it's really feeling the wind, feeling the sun when the sun comes up. And this gives me, I think an expression or a sentiment of belonging, but also of great love for everything. And when you talk about interdependence, we're talking about the relationships with other human beings. So I'm just asking you if you explore the same feeling with nature.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things that I didn't really, that I was experiencing and benefiting from, I thought. But I wasn't calling it out directly. Now I do. But you're absolutely right. So we walk on the beach because we live on the beach. We walk on the beach almost every day. And there's that sense of awe, even when it's this way or that way. And even sometimes getting a little physiologic, when it feels this way and the mood it creates in me to be in this hot, humid day, blah, blah, blah. And when it's nice and cool and open, I don't know how much I just feel better physically. So even from that point of view, and we do know that going out to nature is very helpful for mental health as well as physical health and that. But that sense of connectivity it's hard to beat. In fact, if I can digress a little bit, because you talked about the research. So along these lines, so the sense of being in nature and creating an experience of awe, it does not have to be like, oh my God, look at this beautiful rainbow cloud. It could be that, but it could be just simply walking, like you say, in the beach and feeling the breeze is an experience that's described. It's one of the measures of self-transcendence in neuroscience research, particularly neuroscience and mindfulness. So self-transcendence means being experiences of awe, being in nature, being connected with something greater than us, losing my body boundaries. So there's all kinds of ways to describe it, but that's one of them. And so I'm trained in a program called Mindfulness-Oriented Recovery Enhancement. It's an 8-week program that started off primarily for substance use disorder people, but is because when this was started many years ago, substance use, and then we hit the opioid crisis, the funding was so much there for opioids. So it became more for opioid use disorders, opioid addicts and all of that. And when the guy was doing the research initially, he started noticing that the most people, he was doing a lot of work at the VA system, the Veterans Hospitals, and a lot of the people who were misusing and abusing their opioids, addicted to opioids, had chronic pain. So chronic pain or opioid misuse in people with chronic pain alone, substance use disorder alone is what this program has really made a.
What's the name of the program again?
Mindfulness-Oriented Recovery Enhancement. So it's MORE, more.
More.
And if you were on the John Kabat-Zinn, were you on the thing recently with the European thing? So he mentioned that. He mentioned Eric Garland and Moore and all that research, because the research is really now has been well established. It's a real impact on disorders. But one of the things he did was it's mindfulness combined with positive psychology. So there's an intentional layer in psychology. So what he's done is compared to people. So taking for opioid use disorders, chronic pain, and opioid users, chronic pain patients using opioids, taking those populations compared them to treatment as usual. Those that went through the mindfulness program with the positive psychology, again, he measures self-transcendence. Self-transcendence was much more in the mindfulness program than the other one, right? those that recorded higher and higher on self-transcendence had some changes in the brain, in the frontal theta activity, for what it's worth. But the point being, brain changes were measured, and they were associated with a clinical outcome. Less substance use, less pain perception, less pain disability, and less opioid misuse in those that were on opioids for chronic pain. So to me, as a sort of science guy and all of this, it's kind of, you take the mindfulness-based program with the positive psychology, the so-called mystical self-transcendence, walking with nature, translates to some brain changes, which translates to some clinical outcome. So it kind of puts it all together in one thing. I mean, whatever angle you want to come in there, you've got some support there by research. So that's the kind of thing that when I started looking at that, then I started experiencing, says, yeah, something happened to me, and it's good to be in whatever it is that helps you with that so-called awe, self-transcendence, positivity. So you mentioned when I first came in, let's do something happy or positive. And I used to say, no, this is mindfulness. We're just here to be with whatever it is, whatever it is. But since the pandemic, I'll tell you, intentionally cultivating positive states is, it's almost a must at this point.
So very happy that you mentioned positive psychology, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But we have an audience locally here. We have an audience also through Zoom. We're going to open for question and answer. So if you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand or use the reactions button on Zoom and raise hand, and we can look at the screen and see if you would like to ask the question. So we have a question here, please. And, yeah, we can do that.
I just wanted to get more information, if I could, about the kinds of changes in the brain. That's quite fascinating to me.
The kinds of changes.
You said the prefrontal cortex, there were some changes as a result of that. I don't know if there's anything more specific you could share about that.
Well, in that, sorry, she's asking about the changes in the brain I was talking about in that program. So they were using EEGs, which is the electroencephalogram, which is different than MRI scans. So you don't get the specificity exactly where in the brain, but it's called frontal midline theta activity. So as opposed to lateral frontal or back of the head, et cetera. So in that front, there's where there's been some evidence that frontal theta activity correlates with states of being at ease. Sometimes when people get into bliss states, things like that. So that kind of work has not been borne out as much as the MRI scanning, which is a little bit more concrete because you see the changes in the brain structure. So that's what that's what he was looking at, because it was more practical to do. He had 250 people in his study, so this was a large study now over 5 years. So to do MRIs on all those would have been out of sight as far as the finances, let alone time.
So we are open for questions. So let's talk, while you are considering questions, and I encourage you to ask, let's talk a little bit about the integration of positive psychology in this world that in this work that we do, this work of mindfulness. So in the past, we were studying the unhappy people, the people with depression, the people with anxiety, and then somebody decided, oh, let's study the happy people. What makes them happy? So there are a few things there. We know that perhaps 50% is genetic. You know, some people are prone to be grumpy and complaining, like me. And some people are prone to be Mr. Happy, like you. So there's 50% then. Then there's those things in life, those life situations that when they change, they really boost our happiness. So get a new car, get a better house, have a nice relationship, a promotion, a trip. But actually, this is only 10% of the happiness. And we have control over 40% of happiness, doing a few things, such as expressing gratitude, cultivating optimism, avoiding social comparison and overthinking, going to the flow state, doing more of the things that we really enjoy doing, taking care of our health, having some sort of spiritual life, some sort of religious practice, even if it is, in our case, the insight meditation, the vipassana that we practice, things like this. How do you have seen the merging of positive psychology with insight meditation?
Yeah, I haven't, thanks for asking, because I'm still sort of navigating that world. So number one, and maybe to your point a little bit, the positive psychology, positive qualities, I guess, are trainable, and we can change our brain to be more that way. So even if we're 50% born with some kind of personality trait that is not so positive, we can be trained to be much more positive by using whatever practices. And that's the work from, some of you may have heard of Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, who was one of these mindfulness guys, neuroscientists doing a lot of work. And then eventually he switched over to the Center for Healthy Minds.
Mhm.
So he shifted the whole thing from mindfulness research to cultivating positive states. And this is at least what I've seen. The merging, to me, I haven't seen it 100% other than somebody like him, but it sort of still seems to be separated. Here's the mindfulness insight vipassana, and here's the loving kindness or gratitude practices and this, and then you do some of this, then you do some of this, and do some of this. It may not be infused together, but what I have been trying these days in some of my drop-in sessions, when I do these drop-in sessions on Wednesdays, is before I lead a practice for about 20 or 30 minutes, before I start the practice, I ask everybody to just call to mind a positive quality you want to grow. Just call up gratitude or joy or peace or generosity, whatever you like. Just call it up, feel into it, and then we start the mindfulness practice. And then at the end, call it back up. And the idea is to have that attitude through the whole insight practice. And I know we talk about that quite a bit, at least I do, when reading a body scan. The mind wanders, don't judge yourself. It'll be non-judgmental, sort of neutralish to positive, I guess. But I add friendliness, and a lot of people ask, they say, keep a kind attitude to your experience. I say, don't give yourself a hard time. So the attitude in there that's built in is sort of positive-ish. So it's not harsh or even just plain clinical. It's got a positive quality to it. So that building into it is what I've seen at most. But as far as specific cultivation practices, they seem to be still, one's over here, pure mindfulness kind of thing, if you want. The Vipassana over here is there's cultivation.
It's interesting because in mindfulness, pure mindfulness, we want to be with what is, with equanimity. That's it. Okay, don't cling to what is pleasant, don't resist to what is unpleasant, just let it pass through, be equanimous as much as possible, right? This is the training. But it's interesting that we also practice, for instance, and this has actually an impact on the neuroplasticity. We also practice loving kindness, gratitude, forgiveness, self-compassion. And it's interesting because these are kind of, we use some sort of guided imagery. We use words to create images that invite us to go to a safe place, that invite us to feel very safe, relaxed, and comfortable, and things like this. So it's interesting because we are doing both things, at least in MBSR. It's not uncommon for us to do the loving kindness meditation, the lake meditation, the mountain meditation, and these are all in a way guided imagery. Yeah, I don't have a question. I have a comment.
But I agree with you. It's a guided reflection is the way I call it, guided imagery reflection. So yeah, we see, at least in my MBSR classes, we don't bring them out explicitly until the end kind of thing. Exactly. And in the Vipassana that we do, at least on the 10-day retreats, it's not done until the last day. So it's, you know, developing technique to be mainly getting aware and equanimous, and then at the end, a full day of loving kindness. And you know, and backing up a little, and then for what it's worth, the Richie Davidson's group, actually, is the first place I heard it. In this world, there are, I say 4, they say 3, but 4 fundamental practices that focus attention. Focus on the breath, mind wanders, come back. Open awareness, just being open with whatever is more of a Vipassana thing. I include body scan, which I don't, you know, somewhere in between for me. But anyways, without body, and then there's the cultivation practices. So focused attention, open awareness, cultivation of loving kindness, cultivation, sympathetic joy. So they're kind of separated out that way. And it may be, you know, bringing this all into, let's say, some kind of workout routine. You know, you pump iron this way, you do a little bit of aerobics, and you do a little bit of stretching. All 3 go together. It's best to do all 3. Though you can focus on one more than the other on any given day and kind of thing. So,
very good. So if you want to ask a question, use the reaction button and raise your hand.
or chat.
Okay, we have a question over here.
So you just mentioned a routine. Could you give us sort of like that routine? How would you prescribe that routine to someone that is wanting to start an MBSR or Vipassana training, like on a daily basis? What would you prescribe? And if I could ask you to stretch a little bit more and tell us, be more specific, like, hey, get up at 5 a.m. Or
Write us a prescription.
when you come from work, or when you come home from work, do this before you go to bed, or you can split it up in the morning and afternoon. I hope I'm not asking too much.
I was going to ask, what is your practice?
Okay, so I get up at 4:30 a.m. I nudge Cindy so we can get up, and then finally I get her up like around 5. Sometimes I get her up by around 5, and we practice silent meditation for 45 minutes on a daily basis. And then we try to practice mindful eating when we're eating together. I practice waiting for her to come in and start eating so we can all eat together.
Okay.
So that is practice, because sometimes you have the food in front of you. Your first thought is let me just eat it, and that is something that is practice. You know, and another thing we do is on the weekends we go out and visit different places and try to, you know,
Be nature.
being with nature.
Right.
So yeah, that's my daily practice. But
That's good.
Yeah.
So what's your prescription?
So my prescription, like you guys pointed out, I didn't bring my prescription pad, so I can't write it out for you. And I don't take your insurance, so I can't. But one of the issues, I appreciate what you're asking, and I'm guessing I have an idea, especially to this group. I don't know the people well enough, but one thing for sure is you have to get to know the individual, because what's feasible for any one person. I do a fair amount of one-on-one work now, and a large part of it comes from the recovery community. I'm involved with a couple of groups that run a wellness program for concierge wellness. Rich people coming off drugs, okay? No offense, rich people. But it's a real challenging thing, and they have their own lifestyle. So, you know, coming in there, and some of them coming off of drugs, and they've got those issues. Then you get into an MBSR class, and you've got a whole combination of different people with different issues coming in. It's really hard to be prescriptive.
Okay.
And I don't work on with anybody in the sense of teaching them, quote, how to meditate. What I've become now is I call myself a mindfulness-based program teacher and researcher, because I do work at Nova and we do research projects there, as opposed to a mindfulness teacher even. So certainly not a meditation teacher. I can guide meditations. I can, help people with some of their practices for sure. But what I usually say is develop a practice that's feasible for you, that is regular, if the brain likes regularity. And regular, just like a gym, may only be 3 times a week as opposed to daily. And then stick around with people on the path, people that are doing similar work, whether it's a teacher, a group, a clinician, just somebody to guide you so that you don't go way off track. And then when you can, try to get to at least a daily, if not one of, like, for instance, the stuff you guys offer, a multi-day retreat to deepen your practice, and then let it go from there. Let it unfold from there. Because I don't see a specific end that is, okay, we'll get to this in 4 years. It's not like getting the degree. I went through all that, didn't work. I got through college, after high school to college, to medical school, to residency, and boom, boom, boom. And that was too linear. This world is not like that, at least for me.
Thank you.
We have a question. Before we go there, it's time for the commercial. Cindy and I are going to be facilitating a multi-day silent retreat the first weekend of June. So as far as I know, and I don't have the dates on the top of my head, but we're going to try, still trying. I exchanged some communication with her before she went to the retreat. We were going to call it off because people are very unmovable these days. I think that the fact that everybody is at home and they I got used to not having to drive. So, but anyway, nothing compares to going to a retreat center. Nothing. I mean, I just taught a 5-day silent retreat online. It's excellent, it's wonderful, but it doesn't compare going to a retreat center. So this is time for the commercial and giving you guys a kick on the butt. Get your act together. And once a year, you have to spend an extended period of silence. A weekend is good, but it's not enough. So I think that Cindy and I are going to try again to offer a 5-day or 6-day silent retreat in the beginning of June. And Gus is going to be there with us.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying this. No, but you are all invited, and please consider that. Debbie, could you turn your camera on if you don't mind, and then mute yourself?
I'll unmute myself, but I'm not in my usual spot, so.
Okay, we can hear you.
Sorry about
Go
that.
ahead.
I agree with, we've talked about getting your body ready for meditation, relaxing, dropping the shoulders. So I certainly agree with what Gus has to say. But I was wondering if he could comment on the body's physiologic response to mindfulness, other than pain management.
Debbie, we don't practice actually mindfulness. We don't practice mindfulness aiming to create any specific state. Sometimes we have a state of peace, of serenity, of relaxation. This comes, I know hundreds of people that have this experience. But we also know that practicing going to the silence can bring restlessness, agitation. We have to be very careful. As a teacher, we're always very careful with people who can have some kind of trauma and can, going to the silence can bring a re-traumatization. So we need to be careful there. But you're right. It is possible for us to experience the benefits of relaxation, of serenity, of peace, but it's not assured. I think that's what I wanted to say. It's interesting that in the NDSR program, we do the body scan. So there's a heavy content of the body scan in the NDSR program. And we also do a lot of stretching, mindful movement, mindful stretching. We try not to call it yoga because sometimes yoga is intimidating, but it's based on hatha yoga. We say what we encourage is for people to feel their bodies. Okay, what kind of posture do I need to do right now that is going to make me feel better? What kind of stretch is going to, so you become much more aware of your needs, much more aware of your body. And then incorporating this in your daily life just brings immense benefits.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm gonna try and.
I agree and disagree.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. That's my point of view too, that we don't come to, the aim is to be aware of whatever's happening and then go from there, but with the intention that you see how your mind is what's causing you to feel this way or that way. For instance, for pain perception is really in the brain. The injury that you might feel in a body part where that is injured causing that isn't so much what causes the hurt, it's the interpretation in the brain about the hurt. And then that is really going to be affected by reactions to it, resisting, doing this, wanting that, awfulizing, catastrophizing will make it feel worse. That so-called difference between pain and suffering. So the mindfulness can help reduce the pain perception. It does not cure you of the pain. It does not make the pain go away 100%, but the suffering from the pain, the functional disability from the pain goes way down when you start noticing that you can do something in the mind. So that's where the mindfulness helps out, being quantum as seeing things. So starting there, but then going over a little bit more. So Debbie, I don't know if you're going, you said more than pain. So there's a lot of work on physiology related to things like immune system and inflammation. And some people have shown that if you practice mindfulness in a certain way, the inflammatory genes, at the genetic level, that some of the genes get altered so that there is less inflammation. And then there's just some of the relaxation aspects of the blood pressure goes down and things like that. My suggestion is that if you are looking into research on that, be aware that the researchers, when they're doing, let's say, mindfulness for blood pressure, they're actually looking at blood pressure, people having problems with blood pressure, and they're aiming their it's not a general Vipassana or mindfulness class. It's a mindfulness class to see if it affects blood pressure. So it's going to be oriented a little bit that way, as opposed to what you might be doing, keeping an eye on that. Now, that says, a report that just came out that I found fascinating. There's a well-known teacher called Shishin Young. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. Shishin Young has been doing this mindfulness stuff for a long, long time. And he is a neuroscientist. In fact, his book is I think it's called The Science of Enlightenment, using mindfulness and concentration practices and talking about brain changes and blah, blah, blah. Very easy, readable. But anyway, his group out of University of Arizona just came out with a paper, and they have postulated using some pretty good evidence on what happens to this part of the nervous system, that part of the nervous system, this part of the brain, and all of this during what's called concentration practices, which are not exactly the same as mindfulness or Vipassana, but they're intertwined. It's hard not to do, if you don't have good concentration, it's almost impossible to do good insight.
Correct.
So, and then when you're doing concentration, some insight always bleeds in. So they're not, here's concentration, here's insight, they're sort of intertwined. But anyway, his point being that he used that one a little better because you can focus more on the measurements of the autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic, this part of the brain, that part of the brain. And he really outlined it on hypothetical, just 2 pages in that report. So a lot of physical changes, Debbie, a lot of physiology there, a lot of nervous system changes seen in that report.
It's interesting that you can consider the practice of mindfulness as a practice of developing your ability to focus your attention. But I think that this is the beginning of the practice. Okay, mind wanders, bring it back. Mind wanders, bring it back. So you are developing that one point of focus attention. What came to me after a few years of practicing this, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I think that the answer came from Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh said, look deeply in order to see clearly. So we develop this ability to pay attention for what? Okay, to be inquisitive about life, to be inquisitive about the way that we are living, the way that I am living, what changes can I do in my life, how I can feel better. And I think that even looking at yourself, at your own body and say, okay, what do I need? So when I teach in the MDSR program, there's a moment that I provide a little guidance in the beginning of the practice of stretching. And then I say, okay, now you are on your own. You have to feel your body and you have to decide what kind of posture you are going to do. And people love it because, some people need the guidance, but when we are at a certain stage of the program, they are very capable of knowing, okay, this is what I need right now. Michael, unmute yourself, please.
Yes, hello. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Castellanos, if you could clarify what the current neurological understanding is of what I've heard that if that like with the practice of alternate nostril breathing, the left nostril intubates into the parasympathetic nervous system and the right into the sympathetic. And that is why doing the inhalations and exhalations alternately in the way that is taught helps to balance your autonomic nervous system out. And if you're high in fight or flight, it brings you down. And if you're to shut down with parasympathetic, that it brings you up. And I just wanted to know if you can affirm that that is true scientifically or not.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I've got enough questions over the years on breathing exercises, which are really, really good, but there are so many out there that I couldn't quite keep up with the research and all of that to know what actually happens. The one thing, and I don't want to offend anybody here, one thing I would hear, what I would call the loosely wide open wellness industry, where you do have some really solid people having got really good stuff, including people that come in from the traditional medical world, but some really good people. But then there's also some people on the fringes that are, for the most part, just trying to sell you stuff. But I heard something like, if you breathe into the right side of the nose, that will stimulate the left side of the brain. If you breathe into the left side of the nose, the right side of the brain, because the brain is crossed for sure. But that doesn't take into account that most of what you're feeling in here goes through a certain nerve. The nerve is crossed over, blah, 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 and this and that. So it does not pan out like that. So when I heard that early on, I said, I don't know, this is a little wacky for me. It's not physiologic. It's not true neurologically that way. But that doesn't mean throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's a lot of research done by a lot of legitimate people out there on breathing as a whole. It's a whole industry out there, and some really good work, but I don't really know, to be honest with you. The simple fact that I know is that prolonging exhalation increases parasympathetic drive, and in prolonging inhalation, sympathetic drive. So your point, though, is very good. One point that you do make really, really good. When people feel, when they're upset, stressed out, or something or other, the common thing that everybody, not just people like us teachers, they say, take a deep breath, inhale slowly. In other words, calm down. But you mentioned something. If the person is already shutting down, if their response to whatever's happening is the shutdown mode, it's the last thing you want to do is to tell them calm down more. That's going to keep them down there. So there has to be some awareness. Does this person need to be bumped up, or does this person need to be calmed down for sure?
And
No, I just,
Add anything you want, because I'm not by no means an expert.
well, I mean, one thing that we could just say is that as far as the concentration goes, that on the 8 rungs of yoga, as taught by Patanjali, concentration is the step before meditation. And ekagracha, one-pointedness, is before that. So withdrawal of the senses from the external to the internal. So that's consistent with the yoga philosophy, the 8 rungs. And as far as the breathing goes, I think that's something else I think that's really important there is that, for example, I work a lot with children with exceptional needs, autism and ADHD. And a lot of times you can't teach them how to breathe because either they don't have the proprioceptive ability to adjust their breathing, or they just, they just don't get it. But you can teach them to move in a certain way that will change their breathing. So incorporating motion, or in my case, yoga, will change the breath. And the point that Michael made that I think is so important is leveling the breath, because some people do need to be slowed down. Some people need to be sped up.
Correct.
And so creating a situation where the breath is activated through the motion and then quieted through the motion can be a very effective tool.
Yeah.
Dr. Castellano, can you explain, and I know we're getting close our time, but I heard 2 terms that are for me were 2 brand new terms that you and Michael mentioned. And can you explain the difference between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system?
So,
Sorry.
22 seconds. Yes. So there's this thing called the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system means, if you want, automatic. It's the nervous system that's right now on all of us, running all our organs, running our blood pressure, our breathing, our electrolytes, our hormones, all of that. So it's running the body subconsciously, so you don't have to do it. It's one of the earliest things that develops in the fetus, by the way. But it also is the nervous system that is monitoring our environment for safety and danger. It's keeping an eye right now that your input, whatever's coming in internally and externally, is that you're safe, or you're not safe. And then it will trigger the so-called stress response, which can be called the fight or flight or freeze collapse response that we'll go into. But that autonomic nervous system has 2 branches. One is the accelerator, that's sympathetic, and one is called parasympathetic, that's the brake. And they're in balancing, because sometimes you need energy, sometimes you don't. You need to calm down. Generally speaking, sympathetic would be under threat, would be fight or flight. And under threat, the parasympathetic is freeze collapse. So this is under threat. If you feel unsafe, if you feel danger, you go into fight or flight, or if you run out of fight or flight, you then have to collapse and shut down, like feign death, if you will. But under episodes of not stress, when everything is okay, sympathetic is actually something like excite and delight. You get the energy because you're excited. Hey, this is great. This is a good thing. Or on the parasympathetic, the brake side, it's rest and digest. It's what rest and digest. And the parasympathetic nerve that runs most of the parasympathetic drive is by the vagus nerve. Have any of you heard of the vagus nerve?
No. No.
If you haven't heard of the vagus nerve, it's because what goes on in the vagus nerve stays in the vagus nerve. Because this is a relatively new science of polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory talks about even adding something else called social engagement.
Oh, okay.
So the social engagement system of the vagus nerve, which has to do with the vagus nerve goes to the heart.
How do you spell it? Vagus?
VAGUS. It's the largest nerve in the body, goes from the brain down to the, almost to the pelvis. It's the main parasympathetic brake side. It's connected to all the facial muscles up here. It goes to the throat, pharynx, the larynx, the throat. It goes to the heart, and it goes to the belly. The primitive side goes to the belly. But this more evolved side is above the diaphragm, heart, throat, face. When it's active where we want to be, that's social engagement. So getting back to one of your questions initially, we're interdependent, you know, we're connected, interbeing, all of that bit with ourselves, each other, and the planet. It goes through that social engagement system. The social engagement system is what allowed humans to not only survive, but to thrive. We survive, survival of the friendliest, not survival of the fittest. We survived because we collaborated and got together. And then we thrived to, of course, we can overdo it, overdo the capitalism and get all this. But that is what got us to where we are. So we just need to keep evolving, I guess, beyond the mess that we're in. But it's because of that social engagement system. So it comes from that part of the autonomic nervous system. The brain structures come in secondarily to all of that. The autonomic nervous system is primary what drives us. The brain then can analyze and can reduce something so that you don't act out too much. Like when we're in traffic and we get cut off, we trigger a fight or flight as if we're going to get eaten by a tiger. But then the brain logically can come in and says, hey, we're not that threatened. You know, calm down. It's not that big a deal. Let that asshole go. Let that person just go and come back to being calm. So
You should take a deep breath. I hate to do that, but it's time for us to wrap it up. I know that this is interesting. It's so good to have you here.
it's great to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we had a great conversation, and we are very grateful that you came, and I'm inviting you back. We are inviting you back. We want you back. And there are so many questions that we didn't have a chance to take a look at, and I'm sorry for that.
I'm sorry. I'm happy to take emails, calls. If you want to put my
Yeah.
email in the chat room, have anybody, because it makes me a better teacher. I really mean it. Feel free. I tell this to everybody I run into. Any workshop, including this or class, I'm available for you 24/7.
At 18, the number 18, mine.
You
Gus
cannot bother me as much as I was
at
bothered when I practiced medicine.
18mind.
Trust me. Contact me anytime.
.com.
It's Gus at 18mind.com, right?
Gus at 18mind.com.
Okay. There's so much to explore there. I love the idea. You know, we teach a program called Mind Body Skills for people with trauma of the Center for Mind Body Medicine out of Washington, D.C. They came here actually after the shooting in Parkland. And we do a lot of breath work over there. But it's usually people who have hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system. So we do the prolonged exhalation to activate the relaxation response, for instance. There are so many things to explore.
Yeah.
But we need to wrap this up. And usually what we do is at the end, we close our eyes, we just go back to the silence. And then we end with each person saying one word that encapsulates the feelings that we have right now. So I invite you all to right now find that pause just for 1 minute. Close your eyes. And as we talk about breathing, check your breath right now. Check your breath right now. And try to think about one word. It doesn't have to be one word, a few words that encapsulate, as I said, the experience of these 90 minutes that we spent together. And that is coming to a close right now. So with the nice note, but I think I should open your eyes. Then I'll call your name. I'm looking at you on the screen. Please unmute yourselves. And then we're going to do the people here in the room as well. Let's start with Damien and then Rich.
Hey, everybody. Awareness of awareness.
Awareness of awareness. Rich and then Michael.
Oh, for me, it's an openness.
Openness. Michael and then Noella.
My word is,
I'm sorry.
Go and then Noella. Go, Michael.
Breathe,
my word is. Go ahead, Noella. Ladies first.
breathe and relax.
Breathe and relax. Michael and then Sonia.
Thankful.
Say thankful?
Thankful.
Thankful, yes. Sonia and then Lily.
Okay, gratitude for this event.
Gratitude for this event. Lily and then Sherry.
I got conscious curiosity.
Oh, conscious curiosity. Sherry and then Marcella.
I have confirming and validating.
Confirming and validating.
Confirming and validating. Wonderful. Marcella and then Tracy.
Lots of gratitude to all. Thank you so much. My word will be inner balance.
Inner balance. Tracy and then Jose.
My word is interconnectedness and curiosity.
Good. Jose.
My word is learning.
Learning.
Stimulating.
Intrigue.
Excited and delighted.
What about your word, Piero?
I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we are together as a community doing this. It's so important for all of us. The world needs us. So we have a responsibility of keeping this work going. So I encourage all of you to do the practice, to continue the practice. It's something that has been going on for millennia. And we are the carriers of the torch. We are the keepers of the embers to keep the fire going. So I think that my word is gratitude. I put my hands together to express my gratitude to all of you. Really. Thank you for your practice. We'll see each other again if you want to practice with me every day at 10:30. Cindy is leading the meditations on Thursdays and Sundays. And Gus has also a drop-in on Wednesdays. What time is yours? Noon. At noon on Wednesdays. So you can come to mine at 10:30 and then you go to Gus at 12. And we keep meditating the entire day. This sounds good, right?
That's what Jose said.
Thank you, everybody. Nice seeing you all.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much.